Hello, and welcome to Demonstration 29.2, integrating a RESTful repository that requires basic authentication with Syndeia Cloud via the web dashboard. We will be using OpenMBE, specifically the MMS server, which is part of OpenMBE, as an example repository for this demonstration. This demonstration only serves as an example for the repositories or tools you can integrate in your own organization that provides a REST API with basic authentication with Syndeia Web Dashboard. Specifically in this demo, we will cover the following. We'll demonstrate to you how to integrate a RESTful repository using basic authentication. For this, we'll use the OpenMBE MMS server. The prerequisite for this demonstration is that you have already watched demonstration 29.1, where you have learned about the basics of requests, responses, and collections to build in the Syndeia Web Dashboard. Specifically in this demonstration, we'll show you how to add RESTful requests to the OpenMBE server, to get organizations in the OpenMBE server, to get all the projects in a given organization, to get references in the project, and to get documents in that project. The OpenMBE server provides a very sophisticated REST API to work with it. We'll also show you how to browse responses on the Syndeia Web Dashboard. OpenMBE is an open source collaborative engineering environment, which is used by many organizations to publish models, for example, SysML-based system architecture models as views or documents that are editable. These are specifically useful during design reviews and publishing reports. Organizations that have deployed OpenMBE and Syndeia are already making them work together. For example, OpenMBE users are leveraging the powerful Syndeia REST API to get access to all the integrations to different repositories and tools that Syndeia brings. They're using the Syndeia REST API to do digital thread graph queries across multiple toolsets and generate traceability reports that are then published as documents in an OpenMBE environment. In this demonstration video, we'll however show you the opposite use case. In this case, we are going to access OpenMBE, specifically the OpenMBE REST API, from within Syndeia's web dashboard to be able to connect to an OpenMBE server, to be able to connect to projects on that server, and to access the documents and contents managed by OpenMBE. This approach can be used to then integrate or connect those documents with other artifacts in the digital engineering environment. Specifically, this video is going to cover an example of basic authentication. With that, let's dive into a demo. In this case, we are now in the Syndeia 3.5 web dashboard, and we see a repository category called RESTful. To add a RESTful repository, I'm going to click on the plus icon next to the RESTful repository type and provide the URL of an OpenMBE server. I'm going to give it a name and a description. And for the authentication type, we'll select basic. And here we'll provide the username and the password for this OpenMBE server, which I have access to. I'll click on the create button. This will add the OpenMBE repository to the Syndeia web dashboard. When I expand, Syndeia will take a moment to initialize this repository and set up the necessary infrastructure we need to go ahead and start creating requests and view responses. Now, before I dive into the REST API calls, let me show you a couple of things. First of all, when you go to an OpenMBE environment, you can log in using your username and password. Note this is the same credentials that are typed in Syndeia. When you log in, you can select from one of the many organizations that you're part of. And within an organization, you can select one or more projects that you're part of. And now when you do continue, you've logged into the project, you can see documents associated with the project that are accessible to you. If you go to a specific document, you can then see the contents of the document or the structure of the document. This whole capability is also accessible through this OpenMBE REST API. And with that, Syndeia can tap into that REST API and make the same calls that you're making in the OpenMBE environment. We're going to show you a few REST API calls. First, we'll get all organizations using the getOrgs endpoint. Then we'll get the projects for one specific organization using the organization ID. And then we'll get all references in that project. We'll access the data in the master branch or the main branch of that project, and we'll try to fetch the document structure. So let's start with that. So the very first call I want to make is to get all organizations in the OpenMBE environment. For that, I will use the orgs endpoint. As you know, you can just right click on the collection, a default collection is available, and go to the Manage Request and Collection panel, go to the Request tab, and add a new request. So in this case, this request is called get all orgs. Give it a description. And the endpoint is called the orgs endpoint. No query parameters, no headers, no body required. Click on the test button, and I can see the test passes, which means I'm able to fetch all the organizations here. I'll click on the save button, and that will save that request in the Syndeia web dashboard. Now, if I collapse and expand that collection, I will see the get all orgs request. At this moment, Syndeia has registered that request. This request is now being saved on the Syndeia Cloud web dashboard. And now when I expand this request, Syndeia will send this request to the OpenMB server, specifically to that orgs endpoint on the OpenMB MS server, and try to fetch the data from that server and display it in a tree view in the Syndeia web dashboard. So let me go ahead and expand that. I got a response from the OpenMB server, and if I look at that response, I can see there are 10 organizations that have been returned. You can notice that there's a square bracket returned from this request, which means this response is an array, it's a collection. And if I expand the collection of organizations, I can see that each of the organizations is an object, a JSON object in particular. If I expand the first one, I can see the name and the ID of that organization. And you can similarly keep expanding and viewing this data. In this case, I will be interested in one organization called the SST, which happens to be the System V2 submission team, of which I'm part of. And we'll be making some more requests to this particular organization to get its data. So that's one way you can actually quickly add an organization in the OpenMB server. Now, that's the first endpoint. The second one we want to look at is all the projects that this organization has access to. For that, I'm going to go back to the requests and collections panel. In this case, as you may have seen in the previous video, it's much easier to just clone that request and change a few things. So here I'll clone that request and create a new request. In this case, this is getting all projects in SST.org. Request to get all projects in SST.org. And in this case, I'm going to use this endpoint. It's org/the ID of the organization, which we got in the previous request, /projects. Again, no query parameters, no headers, no request body. Click on the test button. And here you can see the projects that have been returned by that request. Click on the clone button. And that will create a new request in Syndeia for that entry. And now if I collapse and expand the collection, I can see the list of projects. Again, when I expand that request, Syndeia sends that request to the OpenMB server. We get a response back, which is shown using this node. If I expand the response, I see there are 14 projects that have been returned. And I can expand the projects one by one. You can see the name of the project here. This is System V2 submission team project. If I expand the second one, I can see there's a training project. Now I'm interested in this project specifically, and so we're going to look at all the references, which means all the branches and tags that this project has. So I'll make another request here. So I'll go back to the Manage Request and Collections panel. And again, I would like to clone this request. And this one, I'm looking at all the references in that project. So we'll give it a name, get all refs in the SST project. Give it a meaningful description. And provide a different endpoint. In this case, it's the project's endpoint. We have the ID of the project and the /refs endpoint. If I click on the test button, I can see data coming back from the OpenMB server. If I click on the clone button, this will create a new request as a clone of the original request. Again, cloning is just a very quick way of adding a new request. You can also go ahead and click on the add button and fill out all the details, but sometimes I just prefer to clone and just change the things I need to change to move forward. In this case, a third request has been added. This gets all the references in the SST project. If I expand that, I see there are 40 references. These are different branches, these are different tags, different baselines that have been established for this project. And if you expand one of the references, you can see the type of the reference. In this case, it's a tag with this name. Now there's one particular reference, which is the master branch or the main branch of this project, we're going to make a request, the last and final request to that specific main branch of this project to fetch the documents. And remember, I would like to get the document structure as you're seeing over here, this structure over here, and then potentially going to the one level deeper than that. So let's make the last and final request here. I'll again go to the RESTful collections and request panel. Again, I like to clone a request to do it quickly. I would like to get all the documents in the master branch. So I would get to this request, give it a name, get all docs in the SST main master branch project. There you go. And here I will modify the description. Request to get all the docs in the SST main master branch. And here the endpoint I will use is going to be a little different. So instead of just specifying the references of the project, we want to get the documents. So there's a /master/documents appended to that. So if you look at the endpoint, you're going to projects, you're going to one specific project with this ID, and then you want to get all the references of that project. In particular, you want to go to the master reference, which is the master branch, and then you want to get all the documents. This is an endpoint that's provided by the OpenMB API, and which is also documented through Swagger. And we are hitting this endpoint over here, /project/project ID /ref/ref ID /documents. And if I click on the test button, I can now see all the documents that are returned in the master branch of that OpenMB project. If I click clone, now that request is saved in Syndeia Cloud and will be available to us. And if I refresh that, I can see all the documents here in the SST main branch. And here I can see 7 documents, which is same as the 7 documents you see over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if I expand the documents, I can see the names. So one of the names is this part 1B. Let's expand another one. This is the part 3, Systems Modeling API and Services document, which is also viewed here. And now I can make another request to kind of go into a document and get its document structure. But I think you got the idea how you can quickly add a RESTful repository using basic authentication. And if you have the REST API available for that repository, you can now use that REST API directly in Syndeia Cloud Web Dashboard and get the raw JSON response. Syndeia is not doing any filtering. It's getting the raw response from that repository and bringing it into Syndeia Web Dashboard. Imagine what this does for digital thread and digital twins. You can basically connect to data sources that have often been untapped into your organization or have not been integrated. And you can bring the data in the Syndeia environment. You can connect it to other data in the Syndeia environment. For example, in this case, I could create relations between these documents that are being generated for my design reviews, for my supplier reports, for my internal documentation of project releases or baselining. I could link these documents, connect these documents as part of a digital thread to other digital engineering data. For example, CAD designs, for example, to system architecture models, to other things that I may be working on. So this provides a very clean and easy way to bring your own data and connect it in Syndeia. So going back, what you've seen in this demonstration, you've seen an example of integrating a repository using basic auth, using OpenMB MMS server as an example. You've seen how I have gone ahead and added a request and display the responses for getting organization, getting projects in an organization, getting references in a project, getting the documents in a project, and viewing all those responses in the Syndeia Web Dashboard. And like any other functionality, you can now create relations to this data from the Syndeia Web Dashboard to other data. Now, one of the things I would like to add is that these demonstrations we're doing are showing you how to connect to a RESTful repository on the Syndeia Web Dashboard. Sometimes the responses you're getting are heavily loaded with JSON structure, may be hard to read. We'll also have examples demonstrating how you can consume this in a data science environment using Jupyter Notebooks, and you can create custom reports, tables, charts, and plots from this data that's coming and is being served by the Syndeia Cloud API. Thank you. And if you have any questions regarding this demonstration, you can reach us at our help desk at www.intercax.com/help, and we'll be happy to assist you. Thank you and have a great day.